Hey there, today we're going to be talking about the 8 books that I read in the month of December of 2024. This is my final wrap up for this year. It's exciting. Let's get into it. December was a fantastic reading month for me. Generally, January and December tend to be my top months for some reason every single year. So 3 of the books on this list have already appeared in my either best fiction books of 2024 or my favorite nonfiction books of 2024. So I will mention them really briefly and then move on to the other books. So out of the 8 books that I read in the month of December, 7 of them were fiction books. One of them was a nonfiction book. That nonfiction book is Erasing History: How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future by Stanley. And essentially this is a current examination of international fascism on the rise, both in the United States and internationally. And this author dissects why it's so important for fascist governments to control education and rewrite the history in order to control the narrative. It was simple and easy, digestible to read, informative, and I highly recommend it. It ended up being one of my favorite nonfiction books of the year. Moving on to fiction books. The next 2 books were on my favorite fiction books of the year. The first one of those is a short story collection, and it is the only short story collection that I read this month. That is, There Is a Rio Grande in Heaven by Ruben Reyes Jr. This is a debut queer speculative short story collection that has such imagination. It feels so unique and so fresh. I'm anticipating a lot more books coming out within the next couple of years to have tales about AI and robots and the future. This is one of those short story collections that includes that while also reimagining what the Salvadorian immigrant experience is going to be like moving forward. Highly recommend. The other book that I read in the month of December that also ended up on my favorites is A Sky Full of Elements by Cebo Campbell. The premise of this book is really intriguing. It asks us the question of what we would do as humans if we were given an opportunity to start anew without the systems of oppression that are currently available in the world that we live in. Would we continue to exist within those boundaries, or can we reimagine a better world and a better future? And this is told through the story of a father-daughter relationship as they go on a journey to find out more about themselves and each other and learning more about this recently created world without any white people left. You heard that right. It's a really intriguing premise, really original and unique. I loved it. Okay, moving on to other books that I read. I also ended up reading one short story called Veronica Ruiz Breaks the Bank by Elle Cosimano. This short story can be seen as a prequel to the Finley Donovan series. We are following one of the side characters who is my favorite, Vero, and we get to see her prior to meeting Finley, what she was doing, the trouble that she was getting into, and why she left school. I ended up giving this short story 3.5 stars. I thought it was funny, entertaining. It's definitely over the top as we've come to experience with the rest of the Finley Donovan series. The only reason I didn't love it is because some choices that Vero made didn't feel fully explained or rationalized. And in my head, in the version of Vero that I have built, she wouldn't have made those decisions based on what I now know of her, given that I've read the other books in this series. So yeah, 3.5 stars, really fun and entertaining. I'm hoping that she gets her own series. I also ended up reading No Place to Bury the Dead by Karina Sainz Borgo. This was an advanced reader copy that I read through NetGalley. It's primarily a story about displacement and about survival, and I think part of what the author was trying to do is shed light on the refugee crisis that is currently going on, and specifically at the ways in which refugees are being treated, all the trauma that they're carrying, the abuses that they're being subjected to, and this weird state that they're in without a home or a land or a place to call home. So all of that sounded really great for me, and it had really great ingredients. However, the execution was just not for me. I ended up giving this book 2 stars. So this is set in an unnamed Latin American country where there is a pandemic of amnesia that starts to happen. We follow our main character, her husband, and her kid as they pack up and leave and join people who are migrating outside of this country to flee this new epidemic. Really early on in the novel, tragedy strikes. Their documents and money is stolen, their food is stolen, and her kid ends up dying. And so our main character ends up carrying her dead kid until she's able to find a place for him to rest. I think part of my issue with this book is that it felt too simple in the way that it was executed. given the complex nature of the story and the experiences that people are experiencing. There was a lot of emphasis on characters being good or being bad without any nuanced exploration behind the actions of some of these characters, and it was just too convoluted for me to fully enjoy it, so that's why I gave it 2 stars. In that same vein, I ended up reading another advanced reader copy that I also gave 2 stars to, and this was really disappointing because I love the works of this author. This is Private Rites by Julia Armfield. This is set in a near future rain-drenched world ravaged by climate change. It constantly rains, you rarely get to see the sun, it's constantly foggy, and a lot of people have had to move up into high rises in order to escape the world below that is just unsurvivable. Well, except for the rich. There is an architect who was able to create places for rich people to live that insulates them from everything else that is going on with everybody else. So this particular story unfolds through the eyes of 3 estranged sisters who are brought back together after their father dies. That father who also just happens to be the architect that I just mentioned. So in part, it's a story about loss and grief and about them navigating those complex emotions after their father dies. There is one thing that I really appreciated in this book, and it's that there is one perspective told through the city in which we are able to explore the disparities that people are experiencing, the world as it currently is, the way in which people are still normally going to work in this water-filled world under capitalism. So in a way, it's also a critique of capitalism. I also ended up giving this book 2 stars, and it was similar to No Place to Bury the Dead in that I think Julia Armfield tried to handle a lot of different topics and themes within the book, but together they didn't quite fit, especially with the page count that she had, and everything felt very surface level. Things didn't quite feel explored. And then the end is where it lost me. That's all I will say. I did not like the end. It was the one thing that could have saved it for me, and it didn't. I have 2 more books to talk to you about, and both of these were hitters for me. The first one is called The Ballad of Jacquotte Delahaye by Briony Cameron. This is a historical fiction novel that I borrowed through my library, and I did consume it via audiobook. This was just such an addictive story to read. It's a story about pirates. It has a lot of action. There's a revenge story, morally great characters, queer relationships. It was just really, really fun. So in this one, we follow Jacquotte, who is a queer Black woman who is on a journey to free herself and her community from enslavement in the 1600s in Santo Domingo. I really, really liked it. It was just so much fun to read. And then the last book that I finished in the month of December is Time of the Flies by Claudia Piñeiro. I need to talk to you all about this. This is a translated book by one of my favorite authors. So this is a sequel, and I didn't know this. And some people may argue that you can go ahead and read this without reading the primary book, which, okay, yeah, but you completely spoil the first book. And there were certain parts of this where she references things about her husband as if we knew what she was talking about, and I thought she would fill us in later, but then he just kind of disappeared. That's what prompted me to dig to see what was going on, because there was no way that she was going to do that. So I found out it's a sequel. So don't be like me, read the first book, then dive into this one. Unfortunately, the first book, in this one we follow a previously incarcerated woman. I think she's in her mid 40s or 50s. She's of older age in life, and she is trying to reinvent herself when she is out of prison. She was there for killing her husband's ex-lover, and now that she has been released, she is looking for purpose. So she ends up starting an extermination and private investigation company with her best friend from prison, and together they are going to try to solve a mystery or be accomplices to something that will potentially help them start all over again. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. There is a lot of social commentary on a variety of different topics like femicide, womanhood, motherhood. Particularly, I found this extremely compelling, or this narrative extremely compelling, because it's a perspective that we don't hear from very often. We have this woman who is later in life, and she does not consider herself a mother. She considers herself a woman who has given birth, and now she's sort of absolved herself of any further responsibility responsibilities with her daughter. So in that sense, we also explore a mother-daughter relationship, what it means to be a woman, especially in Argentina. This book also has an interesting perspective that is included, has excerpts from the chorus, which is essentially a group of women, diverse women who gather to discuss certain plots of the book. It gets very contentious. I think this would be a great book club pick because of that element. There's just so much to discuss. This is also going to be one of those slower moving books because we're following our main character as she's sort of rambling in her head and describing her activities day in and day out. That was sort of the charm about this book, in that we get so invested into her life and into her thoughts and in what she thinks is morally right. Barely missed my top favorite books by like this much, just because it was a sequel. So anyways, yes, this was Time of the Flies. So those were the 8 books that I ended up reading in the month of December. This is my final wrap up, and the next video you can expect from me is either going to be my weekly reading wrap up that I do on Mondays, or my review of 2024 and my goals for 2025. It's gonna be one of those two. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.